The forest smelled of rain and danger. Lishan Draven, alpha king of the Moonfang pack, stood at the edge of his territory, his wolf senses sharp and restless. The night should have been calm, the scent of pine, the song of the wind, and the whisper of his pack's bond humming through his veins. But something was wrong. The silence was too perfect. He crouched, fingertips brushing the damp ground. The soil was disturbed, light prints, almost hidden beneath leaves. Human. Fresh. His golden eyes narrowed. "Hunters," he muttered, his deep voice carrying through the mist. Behind him, a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows. "Could just be travelers," said Ronan, his cousin and second in command. "You're seeing ghosts again, cousin." Lishan turned his head slightly, his golden eyes glowing faintly. "Ghosts don't carry silver," he replied. His voice was calm, but there was a quiet warning beneath it, the kind of tone that made even seasoned warriors obey. Ronan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Always so cautious, Your Majesty." Lishan ignored the sarcasm. His instincts screamed that something was off. "Call the sentries back," he said. "I'll handle this myself." Ronan tilted his head. "Alone. I don't need an army to deal with a few humans." The cousin hesitated, then stepped back with a short nod. "As you wish, Alpha." When Ronan disappeared into the fog, Lishan exhaled slowly. The night was still, too still. The only sound was the steady drum of distant thunder. He shifted, bones cracking, for spilling from his skin as his body transformed into a massive black wolf. The forest around him trembled with the presence of the Alpha King. He moved silently through the trees, each step careful, each breath measured. His wolf ears caught every sound, the creak of branches, the flutter of wings, the beat of his own heart. Then he smelled it. Silver. The stench hit him like poison, sharp, metallic, burning the inside of his nose. He froze. The trap was set. A whisper of movement. Too slow. The shot came from the left. Crack. Agony ripped through his side. He staggered, his powerful body trembling as silver burned through his blood. The world spun. His roar shattered the silence, a sound so deep and raw it made the night itself tremble. From the mist, shadows moved, men in dark clothes, carrying rifles glinting with silver. "Hunters. Dozens of them. Bring him down," one shouted. "Aim for the joints." Lishan lunged, claws flashing, tearing through two men before they could fire again. Blood splattered across the leaves. But every movement sent pain searing through his body. The silver wasn't ordinary, it was laced with something darker, something that drained his strength. His breath came out in ragged growls. He swiped, bit, tore, but they kept coming. Then, through the chaos, a familiar scent reached him. Wolf. His pack? No. Not his pack. Ronan stepped out of the fog, his gray fur slick with rain, his eyes cold and distant. He stood back, watching. Watching. Lishan's heart twisted. "Help me!" he roared through their shared mind link. "They're human hunters." But Ronan didn't move. Instead, he shifted back into human form, crossing his arms. "You've ruled long enough, cousin." Lishan froze mid-strike. For a heartbeat, he forgot the pain. "What did you say?" Ronan's smile was slow, almost sad. "You were always too noble. Too merciful. The pack needs a king who knows how to survive this new world." Lishan's body trembled with fury. "You betrayed me." Ronan tilted his head, voice quiet. "I didn't betray you, cousin. I saved the pack. You were just in the way." Another bullet hit, this time in his shoulder. Lishan fell to his knees, blood soaking into the mud. Ronan turned his back as the hunters closed in, their nets glittering with silver threads. "Ronan!" Lishan roared, voice breaking. "Coward! You think they'll spare you?" But his cousin was already gone, swallowed by the fog. The last thing Lishan saw was the cage, a heavy, silver-lined prison. As it slammed shut, his reflection flashed in the metal, a king reduced to a beast in chains. And the forest, once his kingdom, went silent again. Rain fell in cold sheets, turning the hunters' camp into mud. The men laughed around the fire, their faces lit by the orange glow, their hands gripping bottles instead of weapons. They'd earned their prize, the great black wolf, the alpha, the monster of the north. They joked about what the scientists would pay for him. A fortune, they said. But Arya Vale didn't laugh. She sat at the edge of the camp, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the cage. Inside, the wolf lay motionless. His fur was matted with blood and dirt, his breathing shallow, uneven. Even wounded, he was beautiful, too beautiful for this place. Her father, Garrick Vale, noticed her staring. "Don't go near that thing," he warned, his tone sharp with authority. "It'll rip your throat out." "He's suffering," Arya said quietly. "He's a beast," her father snapped. "Not worth a second thought." The other hunters laughed. One lifted his drink. "That beast'll feed us for years once the scientists pay up." Arya clenched her fists. "He's alive," she said, her voice trembling. "He's in pain." Her father slammed his mug down. "Enough. You're here because I said so. Don't forget it." She bit her tongue, swallowing the words burning her throat. Talking back never ended well. Garrick was not a cruel man by his own measure, only practical, as he called it. But Arya saw the truth in the flicker of his eyes whenever silver glinted. Greed. Later that night, the camp grew quiet. The fire burned low, the men snoring in their tents, the rain steady and soft. But Arya couldn't sleep. That sound, that low, pained rumble, wouldn't stop echoing in her ears. It wasn't a growl. It was a cry. She slipped from her tent barefoot, pulling her thin cloak tight against the rain. Each step squelched in the mud as she crept to her father's tent. The keys to the cage hung from a hook just inside the flap. Her hand shook as she reached for them. "If he wakes up, he'll kill you. If father wakes up, he'll do worse." But something deeper pushed her forward. Not courage, not rebellion, but compassion. The kind that hurt. She took the keys and crept to the cage. The wolf's golden eyes flickered open. Even weak, they glowed like molten light. Arya froze. Every instinct screamed to run. But the sight of those eyes, so full of pain, held her in place. She moved closer, heart pounding. "Shh," she whispered, voice barely a breath. "I'm not here to hurt you." The wolf's growl was low and rough, the sound vibrating in her chest. His body tensed, his muscles trembling with exhaustion. Arya knelt, slipping the key into the lock. Her fingers fumbled. It was heavier than she expected. She could feel his eyes on her the whole time. "I don't know if you understand me," she whispered, "but I can't just leave you here." The lock clicked. The sound was deafening. She froze, heart hammering. The wolf shifted, a low rumble, warning and fear all at once. Arya pushed the door open a few inches. "Go," she whispered urgently. "Go before they wake up." The wolf stared at her. For one suspended moment, nothing moved. Then he staggered forward, his massive form filling the doorway. Arya backed away slowly. "Go," she urged again. "You're free." He took another step, and then another, until he was right in front of her. Rain dripped from his fur. His golden eyes met hers, and something wild and ancient passed between them. Something that felt alive. Then, suddenly, too suddenly, he lunged. Pain exploded in her shoulder as his jaws clamped down. She screamed, but it wasn't a killing bite. It was fast, instinctive, and gone in the next heartbeat. He released her, stumbling past her into the storm. She fell to her knees, clutching her bleeding shoulder, gasping from shock. Through the curtain of rain, she saw him vanish into the forest, a shadow swallowed by darkness. And yet, even through the pain, she didn't regret it. Morning came cold and gray. The camp was chaos. The cage was open. Muddy tracks led into the forest. The hunters shouted, cursed, and scrambled to pack their gear. Garrick stormed toward her, fury burning in his eyes. "What did you do?" he demanded. His hand gripped her arm hard enough to bruise. "You did this, didn't you?" Arya tried to speak, but fear clogged her throat. "You let him out," he roared. "You ruined everything." I couldn't watch him die," she stammered. "He wasn't. Don't you dare say he wasn't dangerous." Garrick snapped. "He'll come back and kill us all. You're not my daughter anymore, Arya. You're a traitor." Her breath hitched. "Father." "Get out." His voice was quiet now, dead quiet. "That was worse. Before I forget your blood." The other hunters watched in silence, their faces cold and disgusted. No one helped her. No one spoke. She stumbled away from the camp, clutching her injured shoulder. The wound burned like fire, but it wasn't just pain. It pulsed, glowing faintly beneath the skin. Each heartbeat carried a strange warmth, alive and terrifying. She didn't understand it then, the bond, the mark, the fate she had just tied herself to. All she knew was that she had lost everything. Her home, her father, her safety, because she'd listened to her heart. The rain fell harder as she disappeared into the trees. Behind her, the campfires faded, and the sound of the hunters' curses was swallowed by the forest. For years afterward, she would wake in the middle of the night, hearing the echo of that wolf's cry in her dreams, a cry of pain, rage, and something else. Something she couldn't name. But in that moment, as lightning split the sky, she whispered to herself through the tears, "I'd do it again." The storm had ended by morning, but the world still felt cold and cruel. Arya walked for hours through the endless gray forest, her body shaking from exhaustion. Mud clung to her feet, rain soaked her thin clothes, and her shoulder burned with pain. The bite mark was no longer bleeding, but it glowed faintly beneath her skin, silver and gold swirling like fire trapped under glass. Every heartbeat made it pulse, as if something inside her was alive and aware. She didn't understand what it meant. She only knew that she couldn't go back. By nightfall, she reached the edge of a small town. Lanterns flickered weakly in the mist, and the smell of smoke and wet earth filled the air. She pulled her hood low, hiding her face, and walked toward the nearest inn. Her reflection flashed in a puddle, pale, trembling, and lost. For the first time, she realized she was truly alone. The innkeeper, a heavy-set woman with kind but cautious eyes, looked her over when she stepped inside. "You look like you've walked through the Deadlands," she said. Arya swallowed hard. "Please. I just need a place to rest." "Coin first," the woman said automatically. Arya's fingers brushed the small pouch at her waist, only a few copper coins, what she'd stolen from her father's supply before running. She handed them over silently. The woman's gaze softened. "Up the stairs. Second room to the left. There's water in the basin. You can clean up." "Thank you," Arya whispered. Inside the small wooden room, she sank to the floor. Her shoulder throbbed, the mark glowing softly in the candlelight. She touched it gently. The pain wasn't normal. It wasn't infection. It was something else, a burning that came and went in waves, sometimes sharp, sometimes strangely warm. When she closed her eyes, she could almost hear something, a heartbeat that wasn't hers, slow and deep, echoing in her bones. It was like she was connected to something far away. She dreamt of golden eyes that night, eyes that watched her through the trees, filled with fury and pain. She saw flashes, cages, chains, blood, and a voice that growled her name even though she had never spoken it aloud to him. "Arya." She woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. The mark on her shoulder glowed brighter, burning hot, then cooled again. She wrapped it with cloth and stared at the pale morning light creeping through the window. From that day, her life became one of constant movement. Every few weeks, she changed towns. Sometimes she worked as a cleaner, sometimes a healer's assistant. She learned to listen more than speak. People distrusted wanderers, especially ones with scars that looked like silver fire. Years passed. Seasons blurred together. Summer rains, autumn winds, winter frost. But no matter where she went, she carried the same feeling, a pull in her chest, faint but unending, tugging her northeast. Sometimes she felt it strongest when she looked at the moon. Sometimes she could almost hear a growl on the edge of the wind. At first, she told herself it was guilt, that she was being haunted by the memory of what she'd done, freeing a monster, dooming herself. But deep down, she knew it was something more. Something alive inside her. The bite had bound her to him. 10 years later, Arya stood on a dirt road leading toward the border of the northern forests. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd freed a wolf. Her hair was longer, her face sharper, her eyes harder. Life had made her stronger, but also emptier. The mark on her shoulder still glowed faintly beneath her clothes, and lately, it had started to pulse again, stronger than ever. Every time it did, her chest tightened with the same whisper of instinct. Go home. But home no longer existed. Her father had died years ago, killed by hunters who wanted the bounty he'd once claimed. The camp, the men, the life she knew, all gone. And yet, the pull only grew stronger. That morning, she gave in. She packed what little she had, a knife, dried food, and her father's old compass, and started walking north. Toward the mountains. Toward the place her dreams always led her. She didn't know what waited there. She only knew she needed to find it. As the forest swallowed her path, the mark on her shoulder burned like fire. And somewhere deep within those woods, a beast stirred, his golden eyes snapping open as he felt it too. The blood moon hung heavy over the peaks when Lishan Draven crossed the border of his old territory for the first time in 10 years. He moved silently through the trees, a shadow among shadows. His body was leaner now, his face hardened by years of pain, but his presence was still that of a king, even in exile. Every step stirred memories he had buried under rage and survival. The scent of pine and wet stone. The faint echo of pack laughter. The hum of the bond that once tied hundreds of wolves to his command. Now, it was silent. He paused at the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley below. His valley. Fires burned faintly in the distance. The new pack settlement built by Ronan, his traitorous cousin. Even from here, he could smell the corruption, the fear, the submission, the blood spilled to keep power. A low growl rumbled in his chest. You took my throne, he muttered. You poisoned my pack. But your time is over. His wolf stirred inside him, restless and hungry. Kill him, the animal whispered. Take back what's yours. Soon, he promised. But even vengeance required strength. And strength was something he had spent a decade rebuilding. He turned away from the cliff, moving deeper into the forest. His heightened senses caught everything, the rustle of leaves, the drip of dew, the faint heartbeat of small prey nearby. For the first time in years, he felt something other than bitterness. The land still knew him. The forest still whispered his name. The Alpha has returned. But beneath the sense of pine and damp earth, something else lingered, faint, familiar, maddeningly familiar. He froze. It was human. Yet not just human. It carried something, his own essence. His chest tightened. Oh, impossible. He inhaled again. The scent was soft, warm, threaded with a faint metallic tang of silver, the same silver that had cursed him long ago. The same silver that had bitten her skin. Memories struck like lightning. The cage. The rain. The girl with trembling hands and eyes too kind for the world. Arya. He thought she was dead. He had told himself she was dead. It was easier to hate the memory of her than to live with the confusion she brought. And yet, her scent was here. Alive. He growled lowly, confusion and instinct twisting inside him. Why would she return? As he moved through the trees, the sound of voices reached his ears, the patrolling wolves of his former pack. He slipped behind a rock, watching as 2 gray wolves passed by, muttering to each other. Did you hear what happened in the southern village? One said. Alpha Ronan's new decree, anyone caught helping humans will be executed. The other snorted. Good. Filthy creatures. They bring nothing but death. Lishan's jaw clenched. Ronan had turned the pack into something cruel and small. The Moonfang were once protectors. Now they were slavers. He had seen it from afar during his years of wandering. Wolves killing their own to keep power, hiding from humans instead of ruling with strength. And it all started with him being captured, with her setting him free. His hands curled into fists. He would take back everything. And when he found Ronan, he would make him beg for mercy that would never come. But then the scent came again, faint, carried by the wind. Closer this time. Human, soft, and painfully familiar. He followed it through the trees, moving faster, quieter. The forest opened into a clearing. There, at the edge of the old boundary stones, stood a figure, a woman in a worn cloak, staring at the carved rock that marked the start of his lands. She turned slowly as if sensing him. Even from a distance, Lishan's heart stuttered. Her hair was darker now, her face older, but those eyes, those same gray eyes that once trembled with fear as she unlocked his cage, hadn't changed. It was her, Arya. For a moment, neither of them moved. The wind carried the scent of rain and pine, mingling with the quiet crackle of thunder far away. Then, a low growl slipped from his throat before he could stop it, not of anger but instinct. Her head snapped toward the sound. Fear flashed in her eyes, then recognition. She whispered, "You." And before she could take another breath, shadows moved between them. 4 wolves stepped out from the trees, circling her. Ronan's guards. "Human trespasser," one snarled. The Alpha said to bring any to him alive. Arya's heart hammered. She raised her hands. "Wait. I'm not." One of them lunged, claws flashing. She screamed, stumbling backward, only for a blur of black to slam into the wolf midair. Bones cracked. The attacker flew across the clearing, hitting a tree with a sickening thud. The others froze. A deep, commanding growl filled the air, primal, ancient. The kind that made every living creature pause. The black wolf stood before her, massive and powerful, his golden eyes burning like sunlight through smoke. Arya gasped, stumbling back a step. "No, it can't be." The wolves hesitated, their ears flattening. "Lishan," one stammered, voice trembling through the mental bond. The black wolf bared his teeth. "Tell Ronan the true king has returned." The guards fled, tails tucked, disappearing into the trees. Silence fell again, heavy, thick, charged. Slowly, the wolf turned toward her. Arya's breath caught. He was even larger than she remembered. The years had not broken him. They had forged him into something harder, sharper, more dangerous. But his eyes still glowed with that same wild fire. He took a step forward, then another, until he stood only a few feet away. Rain began to fall again, soft and cold. Arya's throat tightened. "You're real," she whispered. I thought you died." Lishan shifted, his form rippling and twisting until the wolf disappeared, leaving a man in its place, tall, scarred, with eyes that burned gold even in human form. His voice was rough from years of silence. "You should have let me." She stared at him, shocked by the sound of it. Deep, steady, but full of something that made her chest ache. "You saved me once," he continued, taking another step closer. "And because of that, I lost everything." Arya flinched. "I didn't mean to." "You freed a beast," he said coldly. "You thought it mercy. It was a curse." The words cut deeper than he intended. He saw the hurt flash across her face and felt an unexpected twist in his chest. Guilt. He turned his head away. "You shouldn't have come back." "I didn't know I was coming here," she said softly. "Something pulled me." "The mark." She pulled her cloak aside, revealing the glowing scar on her shoulder. "It's been calling me for weeks." His eyes darkened. The mark pulsed faintly in response, as if recognizing its twin buried beneath his own skin. He felt it, the same burning connection, the invisible thread binding them across years and distance. His wolf stirred again, restless and yearning. "You shouldn't have that," he said quietly. "I didn't choose it." He looked at her for a long moment. Rain trickled down his face, his golden eyes locked on hers. There was anger there, yes, but also something else. Something older. Something he didn't want to name. Finally, he spoke again, voice low. You should leave before Ronan finds you. He won't show mercy. And you will? She asked, her voice trembling. He hesitated. The silence stretched between them. Then he said, No. Before she could speak again, he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the forest, leaving her standing alone in the rain. Arya clutched her cloak tighter, her heart pounding. She didn't know whether to run or to follow. All she knew was that her mark burned brighter than ever, and somewhere deep inside, her soul whispered the truth she couldn't ignore. He wasn't just a wolf she'd saved. He was the other half of her fate. The wind carried the smell of pine and cold earth as Arya pushed deeper into the northern wilds. The forest seemed alive, branches whispering above her, roots coiling like veins beneath the moss. Every step took her farther from the world she knew and closer to the place that haunted her dreams. Her shoulder throbbed again. The mark burned with a steady pulse that matched the rhythm of her heart. Sometimes, when she stopped to rest, she thought she could feel another heartbeat echoing faintly beneath her skin, a slow, powerful one that wasn't hers. She pressed her palm against the mark and whispered to herself, "What are you trying to tell me?" There was no answer, only the rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a raven. By dusk, she found a river gliding through the forest, its surface dark as glass. She knelt to drink, her reflection staring back at her, a pale woman with shadows under her eyes and silver lines glimmering faintly on her shoulder. She barely recognized herself. Then a twig snapped behind her. Arya's head jerked up. The air shifted. The forest went silent. She rose slowly, scanning the trees. "Who's there?" she called, her voice tight. No one answered. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but it was too late. Shadows detached themselves from the trees. Massive wolves, their eyes glowing gold and crimson in the fading light. They moved with predatory precision, forming a semicircle around her. Her breath hitched. No. The largest wolf stepped forward, its fur streaked with gray, its fangs bared. When it spoke, its voice was not human, but she understood the meaning through its growl. "Trespasser." Arya stumbled back. "Wait. I didn't mean to cross." The wolf lunged. She screamed and fell backward, hitting the ground hard. The wolf's claws pinned her cloak to the soil, its breath hot and heavy above her face. Just as it lowered its jaws toward her throat, a roar thundered through the forest, deep, commanding, ancient. Every wolf froze. The sound came again, vibrating through the trees. Then the black shape burst from the shadows, a massive wolf, larger than the rest, for black as smoke and eyes like molten gold. His presence filled the clearing like a storm. The attacking wolves lowered their heads instantly. "Alpha," one of them whined, backing away. The black wolf growled once, sharp and final, and they scattered into the woods, vanishing as fast as they'd come. Arya lay frozen, her chest rising and falling in short, terrified breaths. She looked up at her savior, and her heart stopped. It was him. The same golden eyes. The same aura of power and danger. Her hands trembled. "You," she whispered. "You found me." The wolf's head tilted, his gaze unreadable. Then, before she could move, his body shimmered and shifted. Bones cracked, fur receded, and standing where the beast had been was a man, tall, scarred, bare-chested, rain running down his skin. The glow in his eyes did not fade. "Listen." He stared at her for a long moment, silent. His expression was a mask of fury and confusion, as if he couldn't decide whether to kill her or protect her. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice low and rough. "I didn't mean to come," she managed. "I followed the pull. I couldn't stop it." His gaze flicked to her shoulder, where the mark glowed faintly through the damp fabric. His jaw tightened. "You're still carrying it." "I don't know what it is," she said helplessly. "It burns when you're near. Her voice faltered. "It's been calling me back here for weeks." Lishan's eyes hardened. "Then it's cursed you, as it cursed me." He turned away sharply, muscles tense beneath his skin. "You have no idea what you've walked into, human. My pack doesn't forgive. They will kill you if they catch your scent again." "Then why did you save me?" she asked quietly. He paused but didn't look back. The answer came after a long silence. Because no one else will. He started to walk away, but her voice stopped him. Wait. You said your pack doesn't forgive. Why? Finally he turned, and for the first time she saw it, the pain behind the anger. His golden eyes flickered with something raw and haunted. Because I'm not their king anymore, he said. And they serve a wolf who would rather burn the world than let me take it back. Before she could reply, he shifted again. The great black wolf turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving her standing alone by the river, the echoes of his growl still trembling in the air. Arya clutched her cloak tightly around her shoulders. The mark burned again, stronger than ever, as if answering him. For reasons she didn't understand, she whispered into the night, then maybe the world needs burning. By dawn, Arya was lost. The forest twisted endlessly around her. Every tree looked the same, every sound made her jump. When she finally spotted smoke rising in the distance, she thought it might be a village, but it wasn't. It was a fortress. Tall walls of dark stone loomed above the trees, carved with ancient symbols. Guards patrolled the gates, wolves in human form, armed with spears tipped in silver. The air around the place hummed with menace. Arya's first instinct was to turn back. But before she could, a rough hand grabbed her from behind. A cloth pressed against her mouth. The world went dark. When she woke, her head throbbed. The air smelled of damp stone and rusted metal. She blinked against the dim torchlight and realized she was in a cell, thick iron bars on one side, solid walls on the other. Water dripped from the ceiling. Somewhere nearby, someone was breathing heavily. She sat up slowly. "Hello," she whispered. No answer. Then she saw movement in the shadows beyond the bars, a figure chained to the wall, head bowed, long dark hair matted with sweat. For a moment, she thought it was a stranger. But then he lifted his head, and golden eyes blazed through the darkness. Her heart stopped. "You." Lishan's voice was quiet and sharp as a knife. "You should have stayed away." She scrambled to her feet, gripping the bars. "They caught me. I didn't mean to." "I told you to leave," he said, his tone cold. "But you humans never listen." "I'm not your enemy," she said. "I didn't betray you." His laughter was bitter, low. "No, you freed me once. And because of that, I lost my throne, my pack, my life. Tell me, human, what do you call that if not betrayal?" Arya flinched as his words struck like blows. "I didn't know what they'd do to you," she whispered. "I just wanted to save you." "Save me," he repeated, his lip curling. "You chained me to a curse." She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, the heavy door at the end of the hall creaked open. 2 guards entered, dragging torches that threw long, flickering shadows across the walls. One of them sneered when he saw her. "The human girl," he said. "Ronan wants her alive until dawn. After that, well, the Alpha likes his justice quick." The second guard spat toward Lishan's cell. "And you, fallen king, get to watch her die beside you." Arya's stomach twisted. "Ronan?" she asked. "The same Ronan who—" "The usurper," Lishan said darkly. "My cousin." The guards laughed and left, their footsteps echoing down the hall until only silence remained. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with anger and something heavier, grief. Finally, Arya said softly, "I never wanted to hurt you." He didn't answer, but she saw his hands clench against the chains. The silence stretched until she couldn't bear it anymore. "I remember that night," she said, her voice trembling. "It was raining. You were bleeding. I thought you'd die if I left you there." His golden eyes flickered in the dark. "You should have." Her throat tightened. "Maybe. But I couldn't." The smallest sound broke from him, a sharp exhale that might have been a sigh. He turned his face away, shadows hiding his expression. "Why?" he asked finally, his voice low and rough. "Why risk everything for a monster you didn't even know?" Arya pressed her forehead against the bars. "Because you looked at me," she said. "Not like a monster. Not like my father did. You looked scared. And I thought maybe monsters aren't born, they're made." Lishan didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice was quieter. "You know nothing of monsters." "Then tell me," she whispered. "Tell me what they did to you." His head turned slowly toward her, eyes gleaming. "You wouldn't survive the telling." She swallowed hard but didn't back away. "Try me." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but there was no humor in it. "You have courage," he said softly. "Too much for your own good." Then his gaze dropped to her shoulder. The faint light of her mark glowed through the torn fabric. He stared at it, transfixed. "That mark," he said slowly. "It hasn't faded." "No," she admitted. "It burns sometimes. Like fire. Especially when you're near." His jaw tightened. "It's the bond. My bite marked you. It tied your soul to mine." Arya's breath caught. "You mean, we're connected?" "Against my will," he growled. "It's a curse of the old blood. I didn't mean to do it." Something inside her twisted at his words. "Then how do we break it?" He looked at her, and for a moment, she saw a flash of sadness beneath the anger. "We can't." Silence fell again. The only sound was the steady drip of water and the faint rustle of chains when he moved. Despite everything, the fear, the anger, Arya felt a strange calm settle over her. He was dangerous, yes, but not cruel. Not to her. Finally, she whispered, "If I'm going to die at dawn, I'd rather die talking to someone who remembers my name." He stared at her for a long time. Then, slowly, he said, "Lishan." She blinked. "What?" "My name," he said quietly. "You deserve to know it before you die." Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. "Thank you." For a long while, they said nothing more. But the silence between them had changed. Softer, somehow. When the torches burned low, Arya sank to the floor, exhaustion tugging at her eyelids. Before sleep claimed her, she heard his voice again, barely a whisper through the dark. "I don't want you to die." She smiled faintly, too tired to open her eyes. "Then don't let me." For the first time in years, the Alpha King felt something stir inside him that wasn't rage or hate. Something warm. Something dangerous. He turned his head toward her cell, watching her sleep beneath the faint flicker of torchlight, and thought, foolish human. But his heart, traitor that it was, beat in time with hers. The torches outside the dungeon cells had burned low, leaving the air thick with shadows and silence. Arya sat curled against the cold stone wall, her knees drawn to her chest. Sleep had come in restless bursts, broken by the distant drip of water and the echo of heavy footsteps in the corridor. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ronan's face in her dreams, cruel, smirking, wearing the same golden eyes as Lishan, only colder. Her heart ached with fear, but worse than fear was the thought of what would happen to Lishan when dawn came. They would drag him before the pack, the same wolves that once bowed to him, and they would kill him to prove Ronan's dominance. And she would die beside him. Her throat tightened. She glanced toward the cell opposite hers. He was still there, chained to the wall, his broad shoulders marked with burns from silver restraints. Even wounded, he looked powerful, untamed. But the fury that usually burned in his eyes was quiet now, replaced by a calm so heavy it frightened her more than his anger ever had. "Lishan," she whispered. His head tilted slightly. "You're still awake." "How could I sleep?" she asked softly. "We're both going to die tomorrow." "You shouldn't fear death," he said. "It's quick. Easier than living with what comes before it." His voice was deep and tired, but not cruel. She pressed her forehead to the bars, her voice trembling. "You talk like someone who's already given up." He let out a quiet breath. "I did. A long time ago." She frowned. "Then why do you fight to live?" He looked up at her then, really looked. His eyes glowed faintly, twin embers in the dark. Because even a broken wolf bites until his last breath. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was fragile, uncertain, like the quiet before dawn. Finally, Arya asked, "What happened after that night? After I let you go?" His eyes hardened again, but not at her, at the memory. "I ran," he said slowly. "For days, I ran until my body gave out. The hunters chased me halfway across the mountains. When I finally escaped, the poison from their bullets almost finished me. I thought I'd die there, in the dirt alone." Her chest ached. "But you didn't." He gave a small, humorless smile. "No, I didn't. The old spirits didn't let me. They made me live, to watch everything I built burn. To see my cousin take my crown and twist my pack into something unrecognizable." His voice roughened. "And to remember the human girl who started it all." Arya's eyes filled with tears. "If I could take it back." "You can't." His words were sharp, but the edge softened after a moment. "And maybe I don't want you to." She blinked. "What?" He looked at her through the bars, his expression unreadable. "If you hadn't freed me, I would have died as a captive. Instead, I lived long enough to take back what's mine." His gaze lingered on her face. Even if the price was everything else. She didn't know what to say. The weight of his stare made her heart race. After a while, he looked away again. "Why did you come back here, Arya?" She hesitated. "I didn't mean to. I thought I was running from my past, but something kept pulling me north. I followed it. I didn't understand why until I saw you." His eyes flickered toward her again. "The bond." She nodded. "It's real, isn't it?" "Yes." His voice was quiet, almost reluctant. "My bite bound us. When I marked you that night, it wasn't just blood. It was soul." She touched her shoulder, tracing the faint scar glowing under her sleeve. "And it can't be undone?" "No. Not unless one of us dies." The words hung between them like a sentence. Her chest tightened. "Then maybe it means something. Maybe it wasn't a curse." He gave a low laugh, bitter and quiet. "You think fate did this? That the gods decided a human and a monster should share a soul?" "I think nothing that strong can be an accident," she said softly. "And you're not a monster." He didn't reply, but something in his gaze shifted, the smallest flicker of doubt, quickly hidden. He looked away, pretending not to hear her whisper when she added, "Not to me." Hours passed in uneasy silence. The torches burned lower. The moonlight through the small cracks in the ceiling painted silver lines across the stone floor. Somewhere outside, a horn blew, the call for the dawn trials. Their execution. Arya's hands trembled. "It's time." Lishan stood slowly, the chains clinking as he straightened to his full height. Even weakened, he filled the cell with his presence. His golden eyes met hers through the bars. "When they come," he said quietly, "don't fight." She frowned. "Why?" "Because if you die screaming, they'll call it sport. But if you face them without fear, they'll remember that." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "And you?" He smirked faintly. "I was born for violence. I'll give them a show they'll never forget." Before she could answer, the dungeon door burst open. Guards stormed in, silver chains glinting, spears raised. One unlocked her cell, yanking her forward. Another struck Lishan across the face when he growled. The guard sneered. "You'll both make fine corpses for the Alpha's feast." Lishan's voice was calm. Too calm. "Touch her again," he said, "and you'll lose that hand." The guard laughed, raising his weapon, then froze when his wrist snapped with a sickening crack. Lishan had moved so fast none of them saw it. Even chained, even weakened, his power was terrifying. They beat him for it, silver rods searing his skin, until he fell to his knees. Arya screamed for them to stop. They didn't. When they finally dragged them both toward the courtyard, Lishan's head was bowed, his breath heavy. But Arya saw the spark in his eyes, the silent promise. He wasn't finished. The execution square was carved from black stone, slick with rain and blood. Wolves in human form stood in circles around the raised platform, their eyes gleaming with hunger. Above them, on a throne made of iron and bone, sat Ronan, the usurper, Lishan's cousin. His silver armor gleamed under the stormy sky. Beside him, a priest held a crimson blade, its edge engraved with runes of judgment. Arya was thrown to her knees at the base of the platform. Lishan was forced to stand beside her, his arms shackled, his chest streaked with blood. The crowd howled for their deaths. Ronan rose, smiling down at them like a god admiring his own cruelty. 10 years ago, he said, his voice booming, our pack was ruled by weakness. A king who pitied humans. A king who let us bleed for mercy. He gestured toward Lishan. Behold what mercy makes of a king. Laughter and growls rippled through the crowd. Ronan's eyes shifted to Arya. And this human? This is the creature who cursed our kind. The girl who set the beast free. His smile widened. How poetic that she should die beside him. Arya's heart hammered, but she forced herself to lift her chin. She wouldn't let them see her break. Lishan looked at her once, a glance that said everything and nothing. Ronan stepped closer to him. Any last words, cousin? Lishan's lip curled. Yes. You talk too much. The crowd hissed. Ronan smirked. Still defiant to the end. It's almost admirable. He turned toward the priest. Do it. The priest raised the crimson blade high. Then, everything changed. As the blade caught the light, Arya stumbled, her sleeve tearing at the shoulder. The mark beneath her skin flared, glowing bright gold. The crowd gasped as the light pulsed outward like a heartbeat. Lishan froze, his eyes widening. Ronan spun, fury flashing in his face. What is that? The mark burned hotter. Arya cried out, clutching her shoulder. The same golden light erupted beneath Lishan's skin, the twin mark he'd carried for years blazing to life. The air around them crackled. The crowd recoiled. A sound rose from deep in Lishan's chest, half roar, half growl, echoing like thunder. His chains shattered. The priest barely had time to scream before Lishan lunged. The blade fell, clattering across the stone as Lishan tore through the guards like a storm unleashed. Wolves shifted around them, chaos erupting as the scent of blood filled the air. Arya watched in stunned disbelief. The mark on her shoulder pulsed in rhythm with his movements, every heartbeat sinking to his. She could feel his fury, his strength, his pain. It was overwhelming, a tide of emotion that wasn't entirely hers. Ronan drew his sword, eyes blazing. You dare challenge me again, fallen king? Lishan turned, golden eyes burning brighter than the lightning cracking above them. I am no fallen king, he growled. I am the storm you tried to bury. Their blades met in a clash of steel and fury. Sparks flew. The ground trembled beneath the weight of their strikes. Around them, wolves battled and died, their howls drowned by the roar of the storm. Arya crawled toward the fallen priest's knife, cutting her bonds loose. When she looked up again, Lishan was bleeding but still standing, his eyes locked on Ronan's. Ronan swung wide, aiming for his throat. Lishan caught the blade in his bare hand, blood pouring down his arm, and twisted until the metal snapped. With one final strike, he sent Ronan sprawling backward across the platform. Yield, Lishan said. Ronan spat blood. Never. Then die. Lishan's claws flashed. The next sound was silence. Heavy, final. The storm broke. Rain poured down, washing the blood into the cracks of the stone. The wolves stared in stunned silence. Slowly, one knelt. Then another. One by one, the pack bowed their heads, the sound of their submission filling the air like thunder rolling across the mountains. Lishan stood in the center of it all, chest heaving, his golden eyes dimming with exhaustion. He turned toward Arya. She was on her knees, soaked, trembling, her hand pressed to the glowing mark on her shoulder. The light faded slowly from both their bodies until only faint warmth remained. Their eyes met, and for the first time, neither spoke. There were no words left strong enough to hold what had just happened. The pack had seen. The bond had declared itself. And in that single moment of silence, drenched in rain and blood, the truth settled over them all like prophecy. The Alpha King had returned, and his mate was human. The rain hadn't stopped when the sun began to rise over Blood-Fong territory. Clouds still bruised the sky, and mist clung to the mountains like a shroud. The battlefield was silent now, save for the crows. Broken spears lay scattered across the black stone square, and the air smelled of blood and smoke. Lishan stood at the center, bare-chested and blood-stained, his breath coming in heavy bursts. Around him, wolves knelt, some in awe, others in fear. His golden eyes swept across them, hard and cold. He had done it. Ronan was dead. Yet there was no victory in him, only exhaustion, only the dull echo of what it meant to take a life that once shared his blood. He turned slowly, his gaze landing on Arya. She knelt at the edge of the platform, soaked through, her hair plastered to her face. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against the stone for balance. Her eyes found his, and for a moment, the world went still. The pack, the rain, the blood, all of it disappeared. There was only her. Lishan moved toward her, his bare feet leaving dark prints behind. When he reached her, he stopped. He didn't know what to say. He had no words for the storm inside him. Arya looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "It's over." He shook his head. "No. It's only beginning." He lifted his face to the sky, rain running down his scars. "They won't all accept this," he said. "Some still follow his lies. They'll strike again." Arya swallowed hard. "Then what happens now?" He looked down at her, golden eyes unreadable. "Now," he said quietly, "I remind them who their king truly is." A howl broke the silence. One of the wolves in the crowd lifted his head to the clouds, his cry raw and trembling. Another followed. Then another. Within moments, the sound filled the valley. Hundreds of voices, one song. The song of a pack bending to its alpha once more. Lishan closed his eyes, the sound wrapping around him like a long-lost heartbeat. For the first time in 10 years, he felt the pack bond rekindle, faint and broken, but alive. His power stirred, answering it. He opened his eyes again, his voice deep and commanding. "Gather the healers. Bury the dead. Any who resist the blood oath by moonrise will be cast out." The wolves obeyed, scattering into motion. Only a few lingered, whispering to each other and throwing nervous glances toward the human girl standing near their alpha. Arya felt their eyes like knives. She drew her cloak tighter and turned to Lishan. "They don't trust me." "They will learn," he said simply. "How?" He looked at her then, a faint smile ghosting across his mouth. "Because they have no choice." Before she could respond, a tall, silver-haired wolf elder approached and bowed deeply. "My king," he said, "the curse in your blood must be purged, or the silver will poison you again. The healers have prepared the ritual." Lishan nodded once. "Do it." The elder hesitated, glancing at Arya. "It requires a conduit," he said carefully. "A bondmate." Lishan's gaze flicked to her. "No." The elder bowed again. "Without her, the poison will remain. You will not last the next full moon." Arya stepped forward. "Then I'll do it." Lishan turned sharply. "You don't understand what you're offering. The ritual will draw on the bond. It could kill you." Her voice was steady. "Then we'll die together." Something in his chest twisted painfully at her calmness. He searched her eyes for fear and found none. "You're a fool," he murmured. She smiled faintly. "You've said that before." He closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "So be it." That night, the moon broke through the clouds, pale and cold. The healers had gathered in the old temple, stone walls overgrown with moss, the air thick with herbs and smoke. Lishan lay on the altar, his skin pale, the silver venom beneath his veins glowing faintly like molten metal. Arya stood beside him, hands trembling but determined. The elder handed her a blade. "A drop of your blood," he said, to open the bond. She pressed the tip against her palm. The blade bit deep, and her blood spilled, red and bright, onto Lishan's chest. His body arched, a low growl rumbling through his throat. The elder began to chant. The bond between them flared, gold light spilling from both their marks, weaving through the air like fire. Arya gasped as the energy pulled at her, dragging her toward him. She fell to her knees beside the altar, her hand pressed against his heart. His voice, broken and raw, filled her mind. "Why would you risk this?" She answered through the bond, "Because you would have done the same." Pain tore through them both. The light turned blinding, the room shaking with power. Lishan's body convulsed as the silver burned away, smoke rising from his skin. Arya screamed as the bond flared again, ripping through her veins like lightning. It felt like fire, like drowning, like everything and nothing at once. Then, suddenly, it was over. The light faded. The air went still. Lishan opened his eyes, breathing hard. The silver glow beneath his skin was gone. The poison was purged. But when he looked beside him, Arya had collapsed, unconscious, her hand still resting on his chest. He gathered her gently into his arms. "Arya," he whispered, "stay with me." The elder bowed low. "She lives," he said. "But the bond runs deeper now. What you share is no longer a mark. It's fate." Lishan looked down at her pale face and murmured, "Then fate has poor timing." Arya awoke hours later to the sound of rain tapping against the temple roof. She opened her eyes and found Lishan sitting beside her, watching quietly. His scars had faded. His eyes glowed faintly in the half-light. "You're alive," she whispered. "So are you," he said. Her lips curved faintly. "That's good news, I think." He didn't smile, but his expression softened. "You should rest." "I've done enough resting," she said. "What happens now?" He rose to his feet, looking toward the doorway where dawn's first light crept in. "Now I rebuild my kingdom." "And me?" she asked softly. He turned, his gaze steady. "You stand beside me, whether the pack likes it or not." By the time the sun climbed fully above the mountains, word had already spread through every den and valley. The true Alpha had returned. But whispers followed the news like shadows. Some called it destiny. Others called it blasphemy. Because the new Luna, the Alpha's chosen, was human. Arya had thought surviving her father's cruelty and the hunter's exile had hardened her. She was wrong. Nothing could have prepared her for the look she received when she stepped into the great hall of Bloodfang Keep. Every wolf in the room turned as she entered beside Lishan. Dozens of eyes followed her, some curious, some disgusted, most filled with disbelief. She could hear the murmurs under their breath. "Human. Unclean. Witch. She'll bring ruin." Lishan's hand brushed hers briefly, a silent reassurance. But he didn't slow. He walked straight to the throne at the end of the hall, the massive stone seat carved with the sigil of the Moon Wolf. When he reached it, he turned and faced his pack. "This war is over," he said, his voice carrying like thunder. "We have bled, we have lost, and we have learned. The time for hate ends now." The crowd murmured uneasily. He raised a hand, silencing them. "You call her human," he said, nodding toward Arya. "You call her weakness. But she risked her life to free me when I was nothing but a beast in chains. She faced your blades without fear. Without her, I would not stand before you now. So hear me when I say this." His eyes burned gold. "Arya Vale is Luna of Bloodfang." The hall erupted. Some cheered. Most shouted. A few drew their weapons. Arya flinched, but Lishan's growl cut through the noise, shaking the walls. "Enough!" he roared. Silence fell, thick and heavy. He stepped down from the throne, standing beside her. "I do not care for your approval. You will respect your Luna, or you will answer to me." The threat was clear. No one moved. Finally, one of the older wolves, a woman with silver streaks in her hair, bowed her head. "As the Alpha commands," she said quietly. One by one, the others followed. Grudgingly, unwillingly, but they bowed. When the hall finally emptied, Arya turned to Lishan. You didn't have to do that. He met her gaze. Yes, I did. They'll hate me. They already do, he said simply. But they'll learn to fear you first. Then, maybe, they'll learn to follow. She shook her head with a small, incredulous laugh. You're impossible. He gave a faint smile. So are you. Days turned to weeks. The pack began to rebuild. Wolves who had once followed Ronan returned from hiding, testing their loyalty to the new alpha. Some refused and were cast out. Others swore fealty, kneeling before Lishan under the light of the full moon. Arya did what she could to help, bandaging wounds, tending to the sick, teaching the young how to mix herbs for fever and pain. Slowly, she began to see changes. Wolves who once sneered at her started to meet her eyes. A few even spoke to her without disdain. But not everyone was ready to forgive. One evening, as she gathered herbs near the river, 3 wolves approached. Their leader, a tall, scarred male, blocked her path. Human, he said, his tone sharp. You do not belong here. Arya straightened, clutching her basket. I'm only gathering medicine. Medicine won't save you when Lishan tires of you, he sneered. You think you're queen because he marked you? You're nothing. Just a weakness waiting to be exploited. Before she could answer, a voice cut through the clearing. Careful what you say. The wolves stiffened. Lishan stepped out of the trees, eyes glowing. The scarred male bowed his head, but too late. Lishan's growl rumbled low and dangerous. Touch her, he said, and I'll make an example of you. They backed away quickly, muttering apologies before vanishing into the shadows. Arya let out a shaky breath. You can't keep scaring everyone who looks at me wrong, she said quietly. Yes, I can, he replied, dead serious. She rolled her eyes. That's not how peace works. He studied her for a long moment. You still believe peace is possible between our kinds? I have to, she said softly. Otherwise all this, everything we've suffered, means nothing. Something in his expression softened. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. You're too good for this world, Arya Vale. She smiled faintly. Maybe. But I'm here anyway. They stood in silence for a moment, the river murmuring beside them, the moon rising over the trees. For the first time since the war, Lishan felt the faintest flicker of peace. Not in the pack, not in the kingdom, but in the simple presence of the woman who refused to leave his side. He didn't say it aloud, but he knew it then. She wasn't his weakness. She was his salvation. The full moon had risen again over the valley, pale and cold as a blade. The mountains of Blood Fong stood silent under its light, but tension crackled through the pack like static before a storm. It had been 3 weeks since Lishan reclaimed his throne, and already whispers were spreading. The wolves obeyed him, but not all believed in him. And fewer still accepted her. Arya felt the weight of it every time she walked through the fortress halls. Eyes followed her. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. If she smiled, no one smiled back. If she spoke, the air turned heavy. She had saved their king, yet in their eyes she was still an outsider, a weakness, a stain on their pride. That morning, she stood on the balcony of the great hall, watching the pack below train for battle. Rows of wolves shifted between forms, moving with terrifying precision. Lishan was among them, bare-chested and fierce, his sword flashing under the dawn light. Every swing, every movement, carried the power of a king reborn. Arya couldn't deny it. He was magnificent. But she also couldn't ignore the whispers from the shadows of the courtyard. She doesn't belong. She's a curse. She'll turn him soft. Her hands tightened on the railing until her knuckles turned white. She had endured hatred before, from hunters, from her father, but this was different. These wolves looked at her as if she had stolen something sacred. Later, when she entered the hall, she found the council gathered. Lishan stood at the head of the table, speaking with the elders. Their discussion fell silent the moment she stepped inside. "Forgive me," she said quietly. I didn't mean to interrupt. One of the elders, a broad-shouldered wolf with scars across his face, sneered. You interrupt by existing, human. The room froze. Lishan's eyes flashed gold. Careful, he said in a voice that could break mountains. The elder didn't back down. You ask us to respect her, Alpha, but respect must be earned. What has she done for the pack except bring chaos? Wolves died today because of her mark, because humans followed the scent of her blood. Arya's breath caught. What do you mean? Another elder stepped forward, her tone sharp. 2 scouts were ambushed by hunters. The enemy wears silver sigils, the same kind your kind used when they took our king. Lishan's gaze hardened. Enough, he said. You will not place that blood on her hands. She's a risk, the elder snapped, and risks should be removed. The words hit like a slap. Arya's throat tightened, but she forced herself to speak. You think killing me will bring peace? It won't. It will only prove that you're afraid. A murmur rippled through the hall. Lishan turned toward her, his expression unreadable. Arya. No, she said firmly. Let me speak. Her heart raced, but her voice didn't tremble. You all see me as a human. A weakness. But I'm standing here because I believe this pack can be more than what it was. You hide behind strength and bloodlines, but strength isn't cruelty. Loyalty isn't fear. If you want to prove you're better than humans, then stop acting like the worst of them. For a moment, silence ruled the room. Then, to her surprise, one of the younger wolves, barely more than a boy, bowed his head. She's right, he said. My mother died because of Ronan's hatred. The old ways destroyed us. The elders glared, but Lishan's voice silenced them all. She is right. He looked at Arya then, something fierce and proud in his gaze. The world is changing. Those who cannot change with it will be left behind. The meeting ended soon after, but the moment lingered long into the night. Arya sat by the hearth, staring into the flames. Her hands still shook from the confrontation, yet a strange calm filled her chest. Lishan entered quietly, the scent of rain still clinging to him. You made enemies today, he said. She looked up. Do I regret it? No. He smiled faintly. Good. She studied him for a moment, the flickering firelight softening the sharp edges of his face. Do you ever get tired of fighting? All the time, he said. But peace isn't given. It's taken. He sat beside her, the silence between them gentle, no longer heavy. For the first time since she'd arrived, she felt something in the pack's air shift, not acceptance, but curiosity. The wolves had seen her stand her ground. They might not love her, but they would remember her words. And maybe that was enough. The next morning, Arya walked to the lower barracks to tend the wounded from training. The healers looked up nervously as she entered, unsure if they should let her help. She knelt beside a young wolf with a torn shoulder, cleaned the wound, and bound it with careful hands. Thank you, Luna, he said softly. She smiled faintly. Just Arya is fine. Word spread quickly. By sundown, half the pack had seen their human Luna kneeling in the mud, tending the injured. Wolves who once avoided her began to approach her with small nods of respect. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, Lishan found her again, exhaustion lining his face. You've been working all day, he said. So have you, she replied. I'm the Alpha, he said. And I'm your Luna, she said softly. That means I don't get to hide while you bleed. For the first time in years, Lishan laughed, a low, rough sound that made her heart twist. You're impossible. Good, she said with a smile. That means I'm doing something right. A week later, Lishan called for a gathering under the full moon. Every wolf in Bloodfang territory came, warriors, elders, mothers, pups. The clearing at the heart of the mountain fortress filled with murmurs and the crackle of torches. The moon hung high above them, silver and watchful. Arya stood at Lishan's side, her heart pounding. She could feel their stares, but for once, she wasn't afraid. Lishan raised his hand, and silence fell. "My brothers and sisters," he began, his voice steady and powerful. "For too long, we've been chained by fear. Fear of humans, fear of change, fear of each other. We called ourselves strong, but strength built on hate is hollow." He paused, scanning the crowd. "Our enemies are gathering again. The hunters move through the forests with silver blades and fire in their hearts. But they are not the only threat. Division is. And if we do not stand together, we will fall apart." The crowd shifted uneasily. A few growled low, others whispered. Lishan's voice rose above them. "From this night forward, the Bloodfang pack will not judge worth by blood. Loyalty, not birthright, will bind us." He turned, motioning toward Arya. "This is your Luna. Not by race, not by chance, by bond. She carries both human blood and the mark of the Alpha. She is proof that strength and compassion can share the same heart." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Shock, disbelief, awe. The elders exchanged wary glances. One stepped forward. "You ask us to forget centuries of law, Lishan. You ask wolves to stand beside those who hunted us." "I ask you to survive," he said, his voice sharp. "I ask you to remember that the moon shines on all blood, not just ours." The elder hesitated, then bowed her head. "Then I will follow." Others followed her lead, one by one. The sound of their voices grew louder, until the whole pack was howling, not in anger, but in unity. Arya's eyes filled with tears. She looked up at Lishan, and he met her gaze, the faintest smile breaking through his stern expression. When the howls faded, the night settled into a rare calm. The tension that had hung over the pack for weeks began to loosen, replaced by something else, hope. Arya walked among them, offering smiles, words, and healing hands. For the first time, no one turned away. Lishan watched from the edge of the firelight, pride flickering in his chest. For all his strength, all his power, it was this woman who was rebuilding what he had nearly lost. He stepped forward, his voice rising once more. "By this decree," he said, "let Bloodfang be reborn. Let no wolf or human be judged by the blood that flows in their veins, but by the heart that beats in their chest." The crowd roared their approval, their howls rising again into the night sky. Arya felt the sound vibrate through her bones, through her soul. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was standing between two worlds. She belonged to both. Later that night, when the fires had burned low and the pack began to drift away, Lishan and Arya stood alone in the clearing. The moonlight painted their faces silver. "You've changed them," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, you did." He stepped closer, the air between them charged. "You made me see what I had forgotten, that mercy isn't weakness. That unity is strength." She smiled. "You always had it in you. You just needed to remember." He brushed his thumb along her jaw, a rare tenderness in his touch. "And if I forget again, then I'll remind you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then Lishan took her hand, lifting it to his lips. "The pack will come to love you, Arya Vale," he murmured. "Even if I have to make them." She laughed softly. "That sounds like a threat." He smiled against her skin. "It's a promise." They stood beneath the moon, hand in hand, the scent of pine and smoke around them. Above, the silver light bathed them both, human and wolf, king and Luna, the two halves of a story just beginning. But far to the south, beyond the mountains, smoke was already rising again. The hunters were gathering, and with them, something darker, a new force that whispered of vengeance and ruin. Peace, as always, would come with a price. The first snow of winter fell in silence, blanketing the fortress roofs and forest paths in pale light. Arya watched it drift down from the tower window, the flakes melting against her fingers. 4 weeks after Lishan's decree, there had been peace, uneasy, fragile, but real. The pack had begun to rebuild. Wolves and humans traded in nearby border towns under guarded truce. The wounded were healing. Children laughed again in the courtyards. For the first time since the war, the valley breathed. Yet that peace was fragile, and the air carried the weight of something waiting. That morning, as dawn's gray light spilled over the mountain peaks, a horn sounded from the southern watchtower. 3 notes, sharp, urgent, unmistakable. War. Arya froze, the sound slicing through the cold. Down below, wolves shifted into motion, voices shouting through the fortress. Guards ran to the battlements. The scent of fear and iron filled the air. Lishan burst through the door, his expression grim. "They're here." She turned, her heart racing. "Who?" "Hunters," he said. "And worse." He strode to the balcony, his eyes scanning the valley. From the forest below, shadows moved, rows of torches flickering in the snow. An army. Arya stepped beside him, her breath catching. "How many?" "Too many." His jaw tightened. "They've joined with rogue wolves. Ronan's old loyalists." Her stomach dropped. "But Ronan is dead." Lishan's voice was cold. "His hatred isn't." He turned sharply to one of the guards. "Sound the call. Evacuate the lower dens. Get the pups to the caves. We fight from the fortress walls." The guard bowed and ran. Lishan's gaze returned to the valley. "They want blood." "And they'll get it if you go down there," Arya said, grabbing his arm. "You don't know what they've brought." He looked at her then, the storm in his golden eyes tempered by something softer. "I don't plan to die today." "Then don't fight alone," she said. "Let me help." "You'll stay inside the fortress." "No," her voice was steady. "I can heal. I can keep them alive. Don't ask me to hide while they die." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then stay close to the northern wing. The wounded will be brought there." She reached up, touching his face gently. "Promise me you'll come back." He caught her hand in his, pressing his lips against her palm. "I always come back." Then he was gone, his cloak whipping behind him as he strode toward the gate, his soldiers falling into formation. By midday, the enemy reached the valley. The hunters moved in rows of armor and silver, their leader flying a banner marked with a crimson wolf's head. Behind them marched the rogues, wolves who had abandoned the pack, their eyes glowing red with bloodlust. The air thrummed with tension. Lishan stood at the fortress wall, his black armor gleaming under the snow. His sword glowed faintly with runes of old power, the same kind his ancestors had used to carve this mountain stronghold. Around him, the blood-fong warriors waited, silent, unflinching. A horn blared from below. Then came a voice, amplified by magic. "Lishan Draven," the hunter commander shouted. "You call yourself king, but your crown rests on the blood of traitors. Come down and die like one." Lishan's smile was thin. "You first." He raised his sword high. "For blood Fong." The cry echoed across the walls. Hundreds of wolves howled, the sound shaking the snow from the trees. Then, as one, they charged. Arrows of silver rained from the forest. Wolves leapt from the walls, meeting hunters in midair. The clash of metal and fury shook the ground. Arya worked in the northern wing, her hands stained with blood. She moved from one wounded wolf to another, using herbs and bandages as fast as she could. The scent of iron and smoke filled the halls. "Hold him down," she told one healer, pressing linen against a soldier's wound. The wolf groaned in pain, silver still burning in his veins. "It's okay," she whispered. "You'll live." Outside, thunder cracked. The fortress shuddered as a blast of magic struck the outer gate. Stones rained from the walls. "Arya!" someone shouted. A young scout stumbled into the hall, blood streaking his arm. "They've breached the southern wall." Her heart dropped. "Where's Lishan?" "Still fighting. He's holding them off with the vanguard." She ran to the doorway, looking out into the chaos. The snow had turned red. She could see him, Lishan, cutting through the enemy lines, his sword flashing, his movements a blur of power. But even he was slowing. The rogues came in waves, endless and snarling. Arya's pulse pounded. She turned to the remaining healers. "We can't stay here. Move the wounded to the inner halls." "Go." They obeyed. She grabbed a cloak and ran toward the main courtyard, the roar of battle swallowing her. The courtyard was hell. Bodies lay scattered across the stone. Smoke rose from burning towers. Lishan was at the center, surrounded, his blade cutting through both hunter and wolf alike. Blood streaked his face, but his eyes still burned gold. A rogue lunged at him from behind. Arya shouted, "Lishan!" He turned just in time, spinning to strike. The blade met flesh. The rogue fell, but not before driving a dagger into Lishan's side. He staggered, the wound deep. Arya ran to him, catching his arm. "You're hurt." He gritted his teeth. "It's nothing." She tore a strip of cloth and pressed it against the wound, her hands trembling. "You can't keep fighting like this." He caught her wrist. "I told you to stay inside." "And I told you no," she said fiercely. "If you die, all of this dies with you." He started to speak, but the ground shook again. A blast of fire hit the outer wall, sending stone flying. The hunters had brought siege weapons, cannons fueled by silver fire. Lishan's face went pale. "They'll bring down the fortress." "Then we have to stop them," Arya said. He looked at her, then at the burning walls. "Get to safety." "I'm not leaving you." For a heartbeat, they stared at each other through the smoke and falling snow. Then he nodded once. "Then we finish this together." They fought side by side through the burning courtyard. Lishan cut through waves of enemies, while Arya pulled the wounded to cover and hurled burning oil at the siege lines. The air filled with roars and firelight. When the first cannon collapsed, the hunters' lines faltered. The rogues turned on each other, snarling in panic. But victory came at a cost. The fortress walls cracked, the towers burned, and Lishan's strength began to fade. He leaned on his sword, chest heaving. "It's done," he said hoarsely. Arya grabbed his arm, helping him stand. "No," she said softly, looking at the field of bodies. "It's just beginning." Far to the south, in the ashes of their camp, a single hunter survived the fall. He crawled through the snow, clutching a bloodied banner. When he reached the ridge, a shadow fell over him. A figure stepped from the mist, tall, cloaked in silver armor, eyes gleaming red. "Report," the figure said. The hunter coughed blood. "We failed. The Alpha King still lives." The figure's lips curled into a cold smile. "Good. Let him. I want him to see what comes next." The wind carried the figure's words away, but the sound of laughter, low, dark, and familiar, lingered long after. The snow melted to mud in the weeks that followed. Smoke still rose from the ruined towers, and the scent of blood clung to the air long after the fires had died. The Bloodfang pack had won, but the cost was steep, too steep. Arya moved through the healing halls, exhaustion shadowing her eyes. Every face she passed reminded her of what they had lost: brothers, sisters, friends. Too many graves dug in frozen ground. Lishan had barely spoken since the battle. He spent his nights standing on the ramparts, staring toward the southern horizon where the hunters had come from. He didn't eat. He barely slept. The wound in his side healed, but something else inside him didn't. One night, Arya found him there again, watching the valley under the fading moonlight. "You should rest," she said softly. "I can't." His voice was low, rough. "You've barely slept in days." He turned his head slightly. "Neither have you." She stepped closer, folding her arms against the cold. "You can't keep carrying this alone, Lishan." His jaw tightened. "They died because of me. Because I let humans live." She shook her head. "No. They died because someone else is still trying to tear this world apart." He said nothing. The silence stretched between them like ice. Finally she reached out, touching his hand. "Don't lose yourself to this." His gaze met hers, sharp and haunted. "And if I already have?" Before she could answer, a horn sounded from below. Both turned sharply. It wasn't the warning call this time, it was the signal of return. A scout staggered through the gates, his armor torn, his fur matted with blood. "Alpha!" he gasped. "We found something." Lishan strode forward. "What?" The scout fell to his knees. "The hunters are regrouping. They've built camps beyond the river. And they're not alone. Rogues march with them. And someone else, someone powerful, leads them." Arya's stomach turned cold. "Who?" The scout hesitated, his voice breaking. "He calls himself the Blood Prophet. He wears Ronan's sigil." Lishan's eyes flared gold, a snarl tearing from his throat. "Ronan is dead. He claims to speak for his spirit," the scout said. "And he swore that by the next full moon, your walls will fall." A growl rumbled deep in Lishan's chest. The air around him pulsed with energy, the raw power of the Alpha. "Then we'll meet him before the moon rises." Arya stepped forward quickly. "No, Lishan. The pack needs time to heal. You can't march now." He turned on her, his voice sharp. "If I wait, he'll bring the fight to our gates again. I won't let that happen." "You can't save everyone by destroying yourself," she said, her voice cracking. "You're not alone in this." He stopped then, breathing hard. For a moment, his anger faltered, replaced by something else, fear. Not for himself, but for her. "If anything happens to you," he said quietly, "I'll burn the world." Her eyes softened. "Then don't let the world make you forget who you are." He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and looked out over the valley again, where smoke from the enemy's new fires smudged the horizon. His voice was low but steady. "Prepare the warriors. By dawn, we march." Before dawn, the pack assembled. The howls that rose through the mountains were fierce, a promise of vengeance. Lishan stood at their head, black armor gleaming in the half-light, the mark on his chest glowing faintly through the scars. Arya watched from the gate as he mounted his steed. Snow swirled around them, the wind carrying the scent of blood and pine. "Come back to me," she whispered. He turned, meeting her gaze across the courtyard. "Always." Then the gates opened, and the Alpha King rode into the storm, his warriors following behind. The sound of their howls echoed through the mountains, carrying far into the frozen wild. The war for Bloodfang was not over. It had only just begun. The march south was silent except for the crunch of snow and the soft, rhythmic breathing of hundreds of wolves. They moved like a shadow across the valley floor, every step deliberate. Lishan rode at the front, his cloak whipping in the icy wind, eyes fixed on the distant glow of enemy fires. The Blood Prophet's army waited beyond the river, a scar of red flame in the endless white. Even from miles away, Lishan could smell the mix of silver and blood, the stench of madness that clung to the rogues who followed the false prophet's call. The moon hung low, swollen and red. When they reached the ridge overlooking the enemy camp, the pack halted. Arya rode beside him despite his protests. Her cheeks were pale, her hair tangled with frost, but her eyes held the same calm determination he'd come to know too well. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, not looking at her. "You've said that before," she replied. "I ignored you then too." He gave her a sideways glance, his lips twitching faintly. "You make a habit of defying me. Someone has to keep you human," she said. "You forget too easily." He didn't answer, but his fingers tightened on the reins. Below them, the fires flickered and the sound of drums began to rise. Deep, rhythmic, ancient. Lishan felt his wolf stir inside him, the animal side hungry for blood. But under the drums came another sound. Chanting. Voices in perfect unison, low and guttural. "The Blood King rises," they intoned. "The traitor falls." Arya shivered. "They sound like they believe it." "They always believe until they're reminded who the real king is," he said. He raised his hand, and his warriors began to fan out along the ridge. Scouts slipped down the slopes like ghosts, setting silent traps in the snow. The battle would begin when the moon reached its peak. Hours passed. The sky turned from red to silver. The chanting below grew louder, faster, fevered. When the moon finally climbed high above the valley, a horn sounded from the camp. The blood prophet stepped into view. He was tall and cloaked in dark furs, his armor painted crimson with blood. His face was hidden by a wolf skull, and in his hand he carried a staff carved from bone. Silver flames burned along its length. "Listen, Draven!" His voice thundered through the valley. "You wear a crown built on lies. Your throne belongs to the bloodline of Ronan." Lishan's golden eyes burned. "Ronan's bloodline ended by my hand." "Not his vengeance," the prophet said, laughing. "He lives through me." He threw back his hood. The skull mask cracked apart and fell, revealing a man's face, scarred, pale, and far too familiar. Arya's breath caught. She knew that face. Not from dreams or stories, but from memories she'd tried to bury. Her father, Garrick Vale. He looked older, thinner, his eyes hollow and burning with madness, but she knew him all the same. "Father!" she whispered, her voice breaking. "No." Lishan turned sharply, disbelief flashing across his features. "This is your doing?" Garrick smiled, a terrible, broken grin. "My doing. You made it possible, Alpha. You let my daughter poison your pack, you took her into your bed, and in doing so you sealed your fate." Arya shook her head, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You're wrong. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Garrick shouted. "I lost everything the night you freed that monster. You ruined me, girl. So I took the only thing I had left, your betrayal, and turned it into power." He raised the staff high. The bone runes blazed red. Around him, the rogues howled in frenzy, their bodies twisting, for darkening, eyes glowing blood-red. Arya gasped. "He's using blood magic." Lishan's voice dropped to a growl. "Then we end it." He leapt from his mount and shifted midair, black fur rippling into place. His roar echoed through the valley, shaking the trees. The Bloodfang pack followed, a wave of fur and claws descending upon the camp. The battle began like a storm breaking over stone. The rogues met them head-on, snapping and snarling, their strength unnatural. Lishan tore through them, his fangs finding throats, his claws ripping through armor. For every wolf he felled, two more took their place. The sky turned red with sparks and smoke. Arya stayed at the ridge, her heart pounding as she watched Lishan carve a path toward her father. She could feel their bond burning, pain for pain, heartbeat for heartbeat. Every wound he took tore through her like fire. Down below, Garrick raised the staff again. The ground split open, glowing veins of red light spreading across the snow. The dead stirred, wolves fallen in battle rising once more, their eyes empty and cold. Arya stumbled backward, horror clawing up her throat. "No!" She ran down the slope, ignoring Lishan's roar to stay back. She reached the edge of the battlefield just as her father turned toward her. His expression shifted, not recognition, not love, but hatred sharpened by grief. "You shouldn't have come, Arya," he said. "You were supposed to die that night. Please stop this," she begged. "You don't have to do this." He laughed, hollow and bitter. "I already have." Lishan appeared between them in an instant, his body half-shifted, golden eyes blazing. "You've lost, human." "No," Garrick said softly, raising the staff. "You have." He drove the weapon into the ground. The air exploded with light. Lishan was thrown backward, slamming into the snow. Arya fell to her knees, the world spinning. When she looked up, the staff pulsed like a living heart, drawing power from the blood-soaked earth. Her father staggered, his body shaking. "Ronan promised me glory," he rasped. "He promised me vengeance." Lishan rose slowly, smoke rising from his wounds. "And he gave you madness." The two men circled each other, one human, one beast, both bound by the same woman caught between them. Arya tried to stand. "Father, please. Stay out of this." Garrick roared, and the staff flared again. Silver fire shot from its tip, striking Lishan's chest. He stumbled, growling, but didn't fall. He charged forward, claws flashing. The fight was brutal. Blow after blow echoed through the valley, claws against steel, fury against hate. Every strike carried the weight of years, of loss, of betrayal. Finally, Lishan caught the staff in his jaws and tore it from Garrick's hands. He flung it aside and pinned the man to the ground, his teeth bared. "End it!" one of the Blood-Fang warriors shouted. "End the human." Lishan hesitated. Garrick glared up at him, chest heaving. "Do it, beast. Prove me right." Arya's voice broke through the chaos. "No." Both men turned. She stood a few feet away, trembling, tears streaking her face. "Please, Lishan," she whispered. "Don't let hate decide for you." The wolf's golden eyes flickered. Slowly, his body shifted back into human form. He knelt over Garrick, breathing hard, blood running down his arms. "You wanted vengeance," he said softly. "But vengeance ends here." Garrick's defiance cracked. He looked at his daughter one last time. For a moment, something human flickered in his gaze, regret, maybe, or shame. Then he reached for the dagger at his belt. Lishan saw it a second too late. The blade flashed, aimed at Arya. He lunged, knocking it aside. The dagger plunged into his own side instead. Arya screamed. "No!" He collapsed to his knees, blood pouring from the wound. Garrick stared, horror dawning too late. "What have I done?" Arya rushed to Lishan's side, pressing her hands against the wound. "Stay with me, please." Lishan's hand found hers, his grip weak but steady. "It's over," he murmured. Behind them, Garrick stumbled backward, the madness fading from his eyes. "I didn't mean—" His words dissolved into the wind. He fell, the light in his eyes going out. The staff cracked apart beside him, its red glow extinguished. The rogue wolves collapsed, lifeless once more. The valley fell silent. Arya cradled Lishan in her arms. "You saved us." He managed a faint smile. "I told you. I always come back." His eyes fluttered closed, his breathing shallow. The bond burned in her chest, fierce and desperate. She pressed her forehead against his. "Then come back again," she whispered. "Please." The mark on her shoulder flared gold, pulsing wildly. Light poured from her hands, sinking into his skin. The wound began to close, the blood slowing. She didn't understand how, only that she couldn't stop. The bond had taken before, now it gave. When the glow faded, he lay still. Then, slowly, he opened his eyes. Arya let out a sob, half laughter, half relief. "You stubborn wolf." He exhaled shakily, his fingers brushing her cheek. "You never listen." "Where would the fun be in that?" she said through tears. They sat there together in the snow, surrounded by silence and the scent of ash, the war finally ending with the dawn. The valley thawed slowly over the following weeks. Snow melted into rivers that carried the blood of the fallen away. Spring came like a sigh, hesitant, cautious, a world remembering how to breathe again. Lishan healed, but the wound left a scar across his side, silver and jagged. Arya said it suited him. He said it didn't matter. Both were right. The pack buried their dead under the moonlight, each grave marked with a stone carved by their families. Lishan spoke few words, but his silence carried weight. The wolves followed him again, not out of fear, but faith. Arya spent her days in the healer's wing, tending to the injured. The mark on her shoulder still glowed faintly, but differently now, softer, steady. Sometimes she felt Lishan's heartbeat through it, calm and strong. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, she found him standing at the edge of the forest, staring toward the horizon. The wind tugged at his cloak, carrying the scent of rain. "You're thinking too loud," she said softly. He glanced at her. "You can hear that, can you? Every thought that tries to pretend it isn't a feeling." He gave a quiet laugh. "You know me too well." She stepped closer. "You've been avoiding sleep again." "I don't deserve peace yet," he said. "Not while the ghosts of this war still walk our lands." "They'll fade," she said. If you let them. He turned to her, his golden eyes searching. And what about you, Arya? After everything, do you regret saving me? She looked up at him, her eyes shining in the dusk. If I hadn't, none of this would have happened. But then again, none of this would have happened either. She gestured to the rebuilt walls, the laughter of pups echoing in the distance. So no, I don't regret it. He reached out, cupping her face gently. You paid a high price for my life. So did you, she said. Now let's make it worth it. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. For the first time in a long while, he let himself breathe without guilt. The air smelled of pine and renewal. I will, he whispered. For us. They stood like that until the last light faded, two souls bound by blood, war, and something stronger than either had ever believed possible. And though peace had not yet settled completely over the land, the first true hope had finally begun to bloom. The Alpha King and his human Luna, born of pain, tempered by loss, would rebuild a kingdom not through fear, but through unity. The scars of war would fade. The ghosts would rest. And when the moon rose again over Bloodfong Valley, its light fell not on a battlefield, but on a home reborn. The thaw of spring transformed Bloodfong Valley from a battlefield into a garden of rebirth. The snow gave way to rivers that glistened like veins of silver. The earth was dark and rich again, and green sprouted through the ruins. The fortress walls, once scarred by war, now echoed with life, laughter, training, and the rhythmic pulse of rebuilding. For the first time in generations, wolves and humans worked side by side. The humans who had fled the hunter's rule returned cautiously, bringing their tools and skills. The pack that had once hidden in shadows now walked in sunlight. And at the center of it all stood Arya. The pack had begun to call her Luna, no longer with disdain or reluctance, but with quiet reverence. She didn't rule through power or blood. She ruled through touch, through compassion. Her presence in the fortress had become a quiet force that bound everyone together. When disputes broke out between wolves and humans, over land, over supplies, Arya was the one who calmed them. When pups grew sick, she was the one who tended them through the night. And when fear threatened to resurface, she reminded them what they had fought for. Lishan watched her from the courtyard steps one morning, arms crossed, a faint smile curving his lips. She stood in the garden with a group of young wolves, teaching them how to treat wounds without relying on magic. Her laughter was light and unguarded, the sound of peace. For a man who had known nothing but war, that sound was the truest kind of victory. When she noticed him, she smiled. "You're staring again," she teased. He descended the steps slowly, his presence commanding even in stillness. "I'm thinking," he said. "About what?" "About how strange this is," he admitted, glancing at the wolves laughing around her. "I spent half my life killing humans. Now I'm watching them teach my pack how to build." Arya wiped her hands and approached him. "Strange isn't bad," she said gently. "Strange means change." He studied her face, his expression softening. "You've changed everything, Arya Vale." She tilted her head, smiling. "For the better, I hope." He nodded. "Always for the better." For a long moment, they stood together in quiet contentment, the warmth of spring settling around them. But peace, no matter how deep, always carried the echo of old scars. That evening, Lishan called a council meeting in the great hall. Arya sat beside him, as was now tradition, her mark glowing faintly beneath her collarbone. The council gathered, wolves and humans alike, a sight that would have been unthinkable only months ago. "Trade routes to the west are open again," reported one of the human envoys. "But the Crimson Marsh remains dangerous. Rogue remnants still attack travelers." "They're cowards," Lishan said. "Scavengers picking at the bones of war. I'll send scouts to clear the roads." Arya placed a hand on his arm. "Or we could reach out to them." The hall went silent. Lishan turned to her, brow furrowed. "Reach out." "They were part of your pack once," she said softly. "Ronan's wolves, the ones who fled. Some of them followed because they were afraid, not because they wanted to fight. If we offer them peace, maybe they'll take it." One of the elders growled softly. Or they'll slit our throats while we sleep. Arya met his gaze without flinching. Or they'll finally stop running. Lishan studied her face, then nodded slowly. Send messengers, he ordered. Offer them sanctuary. If they refuse, they'll face exile. But they will have the choice. When the meeting ended, he turned to her quietly. You're braver than most warriors I've known. She smiled faintly. It's easier to be brave when you have someone who believes in you. He brushed his thumb against her cheek. Then we're both lucky. Over the following days, messengers rode out under banners of white and silver. Some never returned. Others came back with rogues willing to kneel before their former king. Slowly, the scattered pieces of the Bloodfang began to knit together again. And Arya's influence grew. The wolves called her the Gentle Flame. She burned quietly but powerfully, reshaping the pack without drawing a blade. She changed laws, rebuilt the healing halls, and insisted that human children be taught alongside wolf pups. Her presence became the bridge between two worlds. But power, even born from kindness, always stirred fear. One evening, as she walked through the halls carrying a stack of scrolls, she overheard two guards whispering near the armory. She's too close to him, one murmured. He's not thinking clearly. He's thinking with his heart, said the other. And hearts get kings killed. Arya stopped, her chest tightening. She turned and walked away quietly, but the words followed her. Hearts get kings killed. That night, she lay awake beside Lishan, watching the moonlight trace the scars on his chest. He slept deeply, his breathing steady, his face softened by peace. She reached out and brushed her fingers over his skin, whispering into the silence. You're not weak, she said. You're what this world needed. He stirred slightly, catching her hand even in sleep. Talking to yourself again, he murmured. She smiled. Maybe. He opened one eye, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Then keep doing it. I like the sound of your voice. She leaned close, pressing a kiss to his temple. Sleep, Alpha. Tomorrow's another battle, just a quieter one. He sighed and drifted back to sleep. She lay awake long after, listening to the wind outside, wondering if peace would ever truly last. Days later, the first rogues returned under banners of truce. They arrived thin, scarred, wary. Their leader, a massive gray wolf with one blind eye, knelt before Lishan in the courtyard. We come seeking forgiveness, he said. Not all of us believed in Ronan's madness. We just wanted to survive. Lishan studied him for a long moment, then extended a hand. Then you'll live among us as brothers, not prisoners. Earn your place, and you'll have one. The gray wolf bowed. You are not the king we feared, he said. You're the king we lost. As they were led away, Arya met Lishan's eyes from across the courtyard. The faintest smile passed between them, quiet triumph, shared and unspoken. That night, when the moon rose full and pale, the pack gathered around the great fire at the heart of the fortress. For the first time, both wolves and humans celebrated together. Music echoed through the valley, laughter blending with howls of joy. Arya sat beside Lishan, her hand in his. Do you hear that? She said softly. That's what peace sounds like. He turned to her, eyes reflecting the firelight. It sounds like you. She laughed. Flattery from a king. Truth from a mate, he corrected. When the first stars appeared, the pack began to chant her name, Luna, Luna, their voices rising into the night. Arya's eyes filled with tears. Lishan lifted her hand high and said to his people, This is your queen, not by blood, but by choice. Not by birthright, but by heart. The queen of Bloodfang. The valley shook with howls of allegiance. And in that moment, beneath the starlit sky, Arya realized the war had not just ended, it had transformed. What they built together would outlast them both. Years passed, and the world changed. Under Lishan and Arya's rule, Bloodfang became more than a kingdom, it became a legend. The forests that once ran red with blood now thrummed with life. Villages rose where battlefields had been. Wolves and humans traded freely, their borders open. The moon, once a symbol of war, became the mark of peace. Lishan grew older, his hair touched with silver, his eyes no less fierce. Arya's beauty deepened with time. Her calm wisdom was now the soul of the kingdom. The mark on her shoulder never faded, glowing faintly whenever Lishan was near, a reminder of what they had survived. Every full moon, the pack gathered in the valley to honor the fallen and renew their oaths. The howls carried for miles, echoing through the mountains, a song of remembrance and unity. On one such night, Arya stood at the balcony of the great hall, watching the wolves below dance around the fire. The air smelled of pine and smoke, and the sky stretched endless and clear. Lishan came to stand beside her, his arm brushing hers. "They still celebrate like it's the first victory," he said, smiling faintly. "Maybe it is," she said. "Every day we wake up without fear is another victory." He nodded. "You gave them that." She turned to him. "No, we did." He looked at her for a long moment. "When I met you, I was a beast in a cage. And when I met you, I was a girl with no place in the world. Now you're queen. Now we're free," she said softly. He smiled, then reached out and cupped her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "All of it? The war, the pain, the loss?" She shook her head. "Pain made us who we are. And love made it worth it." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Then let's make sure this peace lasts long after we're gone." Years turned into decades. The world beyond Bloodfang began to change too. Other packs adopted their ways. Humans and wolves formed councils together. The name Lishan Draven became legend, whispered like a myth around fires far beyond his mountains. And always, beside his name, came hers. The woman who freed a beast and taught a king how to heal. When the time finally came, when Lishan grew too old to stand beneath the moonlight without trembling, Arya stayed beside him, her hand clasped in his. The bond between them glowed softly, the same golden light that had once burned in battle. "I can feel it," he said quietly. "The pull. It's peaceful this time." Arya smiled through her tears. "Then don't fight it." "I'm not afraid," he said. "Not anymore. You were the last thing I needed to remember." Her tears fell onto his hand. "You'll always come back," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Always." He exhaled once, slow and calm, and the golden light between them flickered, then settled, warm and endless. The next morning, the valley was silent. The pack gathered beneath the dawn light. The queen stood at the balcony, her black cloak rippling in the wind, the mark on her shoulder shining like a sun. When she spoke, her voice carried across the mountains. "The Alpha King lives in all of us," she said. "In every breath, in every heartbeat, in every act of courage. As long as the moon rises, his spirit will never fade." The pack howled as one, a song that climbed into the clouds. That night, Arya stood alone in the garden where they'd first rebuilt the fortress. The flowers were in bloom, pale under the moonlight. She looked up, smiling through her tears. "Always," she whispered to the stars. And somewhere beyond the veil of night, a deep, familiar voice answered in her heart. "Always." The wind stirred through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and rain, the promise of a bond that not even death could break. The moon shone brighter, and the wolves of Bloodfang sang again. The kingdom endured. The love endured. And the legend of the Alpha King and his human queen lived on forever. The legend of the Alpha King and his human queen lives on, but their story isn't over yet. If you felt their bond, their pain, and their victory, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter in this world of blood, loyalty, and love that defies fate.